Welcome, dear listeners, to a journey through the heart of Mexico in 1878. Today I bring you a story that echoes through the centuries, the narrative of Rosa Maria, a young woman who discovered that even in the deepest darkness, the light of true love can transform prisons into palaces and curses into blessings. In a time when women were currency for trade and pure hearts were considered weakness, a brave soul defied destiny and proved that dignity cannot be sold and that genuine love can break the heaviest chains. Before we begin this journey, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I want to know what corners of Brazil or the world this story will touch. And don't forget, if you enjoyed this beginning, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more narratives that warm the heart. Year 1878, San Miguel de los Remedios, Mexico. In the time when Porfirio Diaz was consolidating his power and haciendas were kingdoms within the kingdom, the October rain beat against the clay tiles of the Mendoza house like bitter tears from heaven. Inside the modest home, the aroma of burning copal mixed with the smell of cooling tortillas, creating an atmosphere that foreboded painful changes. Rosa Maria watched from the kitchen threshold as her sister Carmen displayed her engagement ring, a small turquoise set in silver that sparkled like a promise of freedom. At 18, Carmen had won the heart of a prosperous merchant from the capital, while Rosa Maria, at 22, remained invisible as her own shadow. Don Evaristo Mendoza adjusted his hat with trembling fingers. His hands, hardened by years of arduous work, seemed incapable of holding anything precious, not even the dignity of his own daughters. 500 gold pesos, he murmured, the words weighing in the air like stones. That is the dowry the Herreras demand. Doña Esperanza lowered her eyes to the rosary between her fingers. The silence that followed was filled only by the persistent drumming of rain and the crackling of the tallow candle that precariously illuminated the small room. It was then that Don Evaristo pronounced the words that would change everything. Rosa Maria will work at Hacienda El Encanto. Don Aurelio Valdemar will pay us 300 pesos for her services. Rosa Maria's world collapsed like a house of cards. She knew the whispered legends about that cursed property, about the young master who had lost his reason after a terrible tragedy. The village women crossed themselves when mentioning Rafael Alejandro Valdemar, the cursed señorito, who lived as a prisoner in his own mansion. What she didn't know was that in 3 days she would depart to discover that monsters are not always those who appear to be. The cart driver Don Pascual abandoned Rosa Maria 200 meters before the hacienda gates, claiming his horses refused to continue. She walked alone along the dusty road, carrying only a small leather suitcase and the weight of her new condition. The wrought-iron gates rose before her like the black wings of a giant condor. Through the elaborately worked bars, she glimpsed the rose-colored stone mansion that gleamed softly under the late afternoon sun. Wild gardens extended around the construction, where nopal cacti grew freely among abandoned rose bushes. Sor Remedios received her with a stern but not cruel countenance. The former nun, 58 years old, maintained the erect posture that years of religious discipline had molded into her bones. "The rules are simple," she said, leading Rosa Maria through corridors adorned with Talavera Poblana tiles. Workday from 5:30 in the morning until Vespers. Meals at 7, 2 in the afternoon and 8 at night. Always pray an Ave Maria before entering the main salon, and never use the señorito's Christian name. Rosa Maria's quarters were Spartan but clean. A narrow bed, a small oratory, and a window that looked onto the inner courtyard where a cracked tile fountain dripped melancholically. On that first night, lying in sheets that smelled of lavender and sadness, Rosa Maria heard in the distance the sound of objects breaking, followed by a male voice reciting prayers in Latin. She didn't know that those sounds were not of madness, but of desperation, and that she would soon discover the difference. The mansion's main salon was a testament to the lost glory of the Valdemars. Polished red cedar furniture reflected the filtered light that entered through windows with Moorish bars. In the center of the room, in a worked leather equipal chair, was he. Rafael Alejandro Valdemar possessed the haughty bearing that only centuries of aristocratic blood can mold. His wavy chestnut hair fell over his forehead in rebellious locks, and his hands, long and pale, held a rosary as if it were an anchor in a stormy sea. Rosa Maria entered the salon with her heart beating hard, carrying a tray with still-warm quesadillas and a pitcher of atole perfumed with cinnamon. The man didn't raise his eyes, keeping his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the windows. For 7 consecutive days the same scene repeated. Rosa Maria deposited the food on a low, dark wooden table, made a respectful bow, and waited in silence. The quesadillas remained untouched, the atole slowly cooled, and Raphael continued motionless like a marble statue. At night, always the same disturbing sounds echoed through the corridors, the crash of clay jugs against walls, followed by those murmured prayers in Latin, as if he tried to exorcise demons that only he could see. But Rosa Maria began to perceive something that others had missed. In his eyes, when the light hit at a certain angle, shone a lucid intelligence and a pain too deep to be mere madness. On the seventh day, she would make a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Sir," Rosa Maria whispered on the seventh day, breaking the sacred silence that Sor Remedios had imposed, "there's a wild poinsettia flower growing in the garden. It's red like the blood of Christ and beautiful like the tears of the Virgin Mary." It was the slightest of reactions, just a subtle movement of the fingers that held the rosary. But Rosa Maria saw it, and her heart jumped like a frightened little bird. There was life in that apparently lost man. In the days that followed, she began to speak softly while tidying the salon. She told about the monarch butterflies she saw migrating in great orange clouds, about the perfume of the Jamaica flowers that bloomed by the property wall, about small daily miracles that she collected like precious pearls. "The butterflies," she murmured one morning, "they say they remember the way home across generations. Each one carries the memory of their grandmothers." This time, Raphael turned his head slightly in her direction. His eyes, dark green like deep cenote waters, met hers for a fleeting instant before looking away again. Rosa Maria felt something awaken within her chest, an emotion she couldn't name. Perhaps it was hope. Perhaps it was the recognition of one wounded soul recognizing another. For 2 weeks, these small interactions became the sacred rhythm of their mornings. He began to turn more frequently when she spoke, and sometimes, just sometimes, his hands relaxed over the rosary. But neither Rosa Maria nor Raphael knew that every gesture, every glance, every whispered word was being observed by eyes that didn't want that light to kindle. The sound of silver spurs against the stone floor announced Don Aurelio Valdemar's arrival like a sinister omen. Tall and imposing, with a meticulously waxed greying moustache and clothes that flaunted the wealth of one who administers others' lands as his own, he inspected the hacienda with predator's eyes, evaluating his prey. Rosa Maria was organizing the linen curtains when she heard him talking with Sor Remedios in the corridor. His words reached her like poisoned darts. "The boy must remain in a contemplative and docile state," Aurelio instructed, his voice carrying the authority of one accustomed to not being questioned. "This servant must understand that her only function is to keep my nephew calm and incapable of causing problems." He handed the governess a small dark glass vial. "Opium poppy, 3 drops in the chamomile tea before sleep. No more, no less." Rosa Maria felt her blood freeze in her veins. Opium, the drug that turned men into shadows of themselves. She hid behind the curtain as Aurelio moved away, but his last words floated through the air like poison. "Soon, there will be no more need for these precautions." That night, while preparing Raphael's evening tea, Rosa Maria held the vial in her trembling hands. 3 drops, so little to transform a brilliant mind into fog. She looked at the golden liquid in the porcelain cup. Then, with a quick and decisive gesture, she poured the tea out the window, replacing it with pure water perfumed only with maguey honey. Outside, an owl cried in the night, as if approving her rebellion. Rosa Maria didn't know yet, but she had just declared silent war against a man who would kill to keep his secrets buried. The storm arrived like a clenched fist from the sky, striking the hacienda with hail the size of precious stones, and winds that howled among the towers like lost souls. Rosa Maria woke startled when screams echoed through the corridor, not of madness, but of pure anguish. "Paloma, mi querida Paloma!" Raphael's voice pierced the walls like a sharp spear, loaded with pain so intense it made Rosa Maria's heart shatter into fragments. Heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor, peons arriving with thick ropes and brutal determination. Sor Remedios followed them, murmuring hurried prayers, while Raphael struggled like a wounded animal against the bindings they intended to place on him. Rosa Maria acted on pure instinct. She ran to the main salon and, before the man writhing in endless nightmare, began to sing. Not a Catholic prayer or Portuguese song, but La Llorona, the millennial song that her Zapotec grandmother had taught her on full moon nights. "Ay de mi, Llorona, Llorona de azul celeste." Her voice, sweet as honey from a hive and deep as roots of ancestral ahuehuete trees, enveloped Raphael like a protective mantle. Slowly, miraculously, his muscles relaxed and the inner storm calmed. "Gracias, hermana," he whispered, using for the first time a word that recognized her humanity. The peons lowered the ropes, confused. Sor Remedios watched with eyes wide with surprise. "Por qué tienes piedad de mí?" Raphael asked, his voice hoarse from so much screaming. Rosa Maria looked into his eyes, seeing in them not madness, but lucidity clear as mountain water. "Porque Dios no abandona a sus hijos, aunque el mundo los olvide." That night, something broke between them, not the barriers of social convenience or superstitious fear, but the false walls that separated two souls destined to find each other. Raphael led Rosa Maria to a portrait hanging on his room's wall, a young woman with black eyes bright as polished obsidian, dressed in the traditional China poblana costume. Her hands, painted with mastery, held a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, and her smile radiated the naive joy of one who still believed love could overcome any obstacle. "Paloma Luz Esmeralda," Raphael murmured, delicately tracing the contour of the painted face. "She should have been my wife 3 years ago?" Rosa Maria sat in the woven straw chair he offered, and for the first time since her arrival, heard the true story of the Valdemar curse. It was 1875, Dia de los Muertos. Raphael and Paloma had ridden to the village to participate in the festivities, she mounted on a white mare, and he on his favorite black stallion. The plaza was full of celebrating families, children running among the candy stalls, and the aroma of copal mixing with the perfume of cempasúchil flowers. "There were fireworks," Raphael continued, his voice becoming a hoarse whisper. "My horse got scared. It was a nervous animal, but I trusted my ability to control it. The accident happened in seconds that stretched like eternity." The stallion reared. Paloma tried to calm her own mount, but the animal, infected by panic, bolted toward the stone fountain in the center of the plaza. "She fell," Raphael said, closing his eyes as if he could still prevent the tragedy. "Hit her head on the stone, died instantly while families celebrated the life of those already gone." Aurelio appeared at the wake like a hungry vulture. He hired a corrupt curandero who declared Raphael touched by evil spirits, incapable of administering the vast Valdemar inheritance, and thus a man in mourning became a prisoner and an ambitious uncle became king of lands that didn't belong to him. "Is that why you never resisted?" Rosa Maria asked gently. Raphael looked at her with surprise, as if no one had ever asked that question. How to resist when you believe your very existence is a curse? In that moment, Rosa Maria understood that her mission was not just to care for a supposedly mad man, but to help a shattered soul find again the will to fight. The letter arrived through a dusty messenger from the road, mounted on a horse foaming at the mouth after the exhausting ride. Rosa Maria recognized her mother's tortured handwriting before even breaking the red wax seal. The words were like precise stabs. "My daughter, the first payment was insufficient. Only 50 pesos, when we need much more. Carmen needs a French silk dress and Spanish mantilla for the wedding. If you don't get 200 pesos by Christmas, you must return home. Your father already speaks of arranging your marriage with Don Prospero, the 45-year-old widower who owns lands near the village." Don Prospero. Rosa Maria remembered him, a man whose breath smelled of sour pulque and whose eyes roamed women's bodies as if they were cattle in the market. The idea of belonging to him made her stomach churn like a storm. "What afflicts you, Rosa Maria?" Raphael asked, noticing how her hands trembled as she folded the letter. She told him about the family blackmail, about the fate awaiting her if she failed in her mission. Raphael listened in silence, but his eyes became hard as flint. "No permitiré que te alejen de este lugar," he declared, and there was a determination in his voice that Rosa Maria hadn't heard before. "Tú eres la única luz que entró en esta casa desde que Paloma se fue." That night, Raphael began to make plans. He knew every centimeter of the hacienda, every secret hidden in its century-old walls. Somewhere in this property was the proof he needed to recover his freedom and protect the only person who had shown genuine kindness in years of solitude. But time ran like sand through fingers, and Don Aurelio began to show signs of growing impatience. The man's hawk-like eyes observed every movement, every breath, every glance exchanged between nephew and caretaker. The silent war was about to transform into open battle, and only one side could emerge victorious. Tomas arrived in the quiet hours before dawn, when only owls and restless spirits wandered the property. The indigenous Otomi foreman, 35 years old, had faithfully served Raphael's father and knew every stone, every beam, every secret of Hacienda El Encanto. His silent steps led him to Raphael's room window, where he made the ancestral sign of his people, 3 soft whistles that imitated the lark's song. Raphael responded immediately, allowing Tomas to climb up the honeysuckle vine that grew by the wall. "Mi señor," Tomas whispered, his black eyes shining with determination. "Your father's will is hidden in the office. Behind the false volume of Don Quixote de la Mancha, there's a secret compartment." Rosa Maria, who had learned to move like a ghost through the corridors, joined them. Her presence no longer caused Tomas any strangeness. The wise man recognized pure souls when he found them. "Aurelio leaves early tomorrow for his monthly trip to the capital," Tomas continued. "I usually create an emergency in the highlands, cattle attacked by pumas. That will give me 6 hours to investigate." Raphael held Rosa Maria's hands between his. They were calloused from work, but soft as rose petals. "If something goes wrong," he murmured, "promise me you'll flee. Go to the Santa Clara convent in Puebla. Sor Remedios will give you letters of recommendation." But Rosa Maria shook her head with determination that surprised both men. "There will be no flight. Either we leave free together, or we face the consequences together." Tomas smiled for the first time in months. He had known many brave women in his life, but few with the serene fire that burned in Rosa Maria's eyes. The plan was drawn. At sunrise, Aurelio would ride toward the remote pastures, leaving the fox momentarily away from the henhouse. It was the only chance they would have, and everyone knew that if they failed, there would be no second opportunity. Aurelio departed at dawn with 3 armed cowboys, his scowling face showing irritation at the emergency that forced him to abandon his activities in the capital. The sound of their horses' hooves disappeared in the distance, like a promise of temporary freedom. Sor Remedios, finally revealing where her true loyalties lay, handed Rosa Maria the bronze key to the office. 50 years I served in this house," she murmured, crossing herself 3 times. "I saw this boy grow up, saw his father's goodness. What Aurelio did is an abomination before God." Don Alejandro Valdemar's office remained exactly as he had left it before dying, property maps scattered over the mahogany desk, silver inkwell with goose quill still waiting for the owner's hand. Rosa Maria felt the powerful presence of the dead patriarch as Raphael headed directly to the bookshelf. His hands found the false volume of Don Quixote, hollow inside, created specifically to hide precious documents. In the secret compartment, besides the official will, there were letters, receipts, and a revelation that made Raphael's blood boil like volcano lava. "My father knew," he whispered, his hands trembling as he held a letter dated just 1 week before Paloma's death. He suspected Aurelio for months. "Look at these receipts. Payments to cowboys to frighten horses with noises during festivities." Rosa Maria read over his shoulder, and the truth revealed itself like an open wound. The accident had not been an accident. Aurelio had orchestrated the scare of Raphael's horse, but hadn't counted on Paloma also being a victim of the tragedy he had carefully planned. It was then that they heard the terrible sound of spurs approaching, too early to be Aurelio's natural return. The man's voice echoed through the corridor like storm thunder. "Tomas was never a good actor. Pumas don't attack cattle during the day, foolish nephew." Aurelio appeared at the office door, accompanied by 2 gunmen Rosa Maria had never seen, men with dead eyes and hands calloused from weapon use. "A convincing accident was necessary," Aurelio said, his mask of concerned uncle finally removed to reveal the monster beneath. "I regret the girl died too, but I can't say I lost much sleep over it." The confession hung in the air like a death sentence, and Rosa Maria understood they had discovered the truth too late. Now they were witnesses who needed to be silenced. The gunmen dragged Raphael to the mansion's basement, a humid and dark place where colonial chains still hung from the rough stone walls. Rosa Maria heard the metallic sound of shackles closing around his wrists, each click like a dagger in her heart. "Seductive witch," Aurelio spat, his eyes shining with hatred as he observed Rosa Maria. "You corrupted my nephew's mind with your ignorant Indian tricks. At dawn, you'll be delivered to ecclesiastical authorities for trial for witchcraft." He threw the will into the wrought iron brazier, and Rosa Maria watched the words of truth transform into ashes that danced like lost souls up the chimney. But Raphael, even chained like an animal, had learned from his father never to trust all truth to a single place. With improvised ink made from nopal sap and silk paper, he kept for important correspondence. He wrote a desperate letter to Don Carlos Maximiliano de Iturbide, the liberal lawyer from the capital who had served under Juarez and maintained an office in Mexico City. Tomás, who had escaped Aurelio's pursuit by knowing every secret trail in the region, received the letter through Sor Remedios. His mission was to ride all night to the capital, crossing dangerous mountains and valleys where bandits usually attacked solitary travelers. Rosa Maria was expelled at dawn, placed in a corn cart heading to the village, but not home, to be delivered to the local priest who would conduct her to ecclesiastical tribunals under accusation of seducing a man with diabolic arts. As the cart moved away from the hacienda, she looked back and saw Raphael at the basement's only window, his hands extending through the bars like a silent plea. Both knew it might be the last time they would see each other, but they also knew that Tomás carried with him the only hope of salvation, if he could arrive in time. The Mendoza family received Rosa Maria with the coldness of those who welcome an unwanted stranger. Don Evaristo didn't even raise his eyes when she entered the house, and Doña Esperanza limited herself to murmuring something about dishonored woman while continuing to knit with mechanical fury. Carmen, resplendent in her French silk wedding dress, looked at her sister as if she were a carrier of bubonic plague. "We hope you haven't brought any curse from that cursed house," she said, adjusting the Spanish mantilla with affected gestures. But Rosa Maria barely heard the cruel words. Her thoughts flew like monarch butterflies to the hacienda, where Raphael remained chained like an animal. Every passing hour was an eternity of agony, every noise on the road a hope that faded when it didn't materialize into salvation. It was then that she heard the unmistakable sound of a military carriage approaching. Through the dusty window, she saw golden dust rising like a cloud of glory on the horizon. The carriage stopped before the humble Mendoza house, with authority that made the earth tremble. From it descended Don Carlos Maximiliano de Iturbide, a tall and elegant man with graying mustache and penetrating eyes, accompanied by federal soldiers in impeccable uniforms. And then, like a miracle of the saints, Raphael emerged from the carriage, free, standing with the restored dignity of one who had recovered his true identity. "Señorita Rosa Maria Mendoza," Don Carlos said with solemn voice, "I come in the name of federal justice to inform you that Don Aurelio Valdemar has been arrested for inheritance usurpation, document falsification, and bribery of public officials." Raphael approached her slowly, as if fearing it was just a cruel dream. His hands found hers, and Rosa Maria felt the world finally return to its correct axis. "Forgive me," he murmured, kneeling before her with a ring of ancient emeralds. "Centennial Valdemar inheritance. ¿Quieres ser mi esposa en sagrado matrimonio cristiano?" Don Evaristo choked on his own air. Carmen dropped the mantilla. Doña Esperanza dropped her knitting. Rosa Maria smiled for the first time in weeks. "Sí, Raphael, forever sí." The wedding was celebrated in the hacienda chapel, restored especially for the occasion. The adobe walls were freshly whitewashed, the wooden pews polished until they shone like mirrors, and the altar decorated with Jamaica and poinsettia flowers that Rosa Maria had planted in honor of Paloma's memory. Don Carlos Maximiliano de Iturbide served as godfather, while Sor Remedios, now revealed as Sister Teresa, who had abandoned the convent to serve the Valdemar family after Raphael's parents' death, led Rosa Maria to the altar with tears of joy running down her time-furrowed face. The village priest, Don Sebastian, celebrated the Mass with a voice that echoed through the ancient vaults like angel song. When the moment for vows arrived, Raphael and Rosa Maria looked into each other's eyes and saw reflected there all the suffering that had led them to that sacred instant. "Raphael Alejandro," Rosa Maria murmured, her voice clear as mountain water, "I promise to love you not only in joys but also in shadows. Oh, I promise to be your companion in golden days and your fortress in moments of storm." "Rosa Maria," he responded, his voice choked with emotion, "I promise to protect you not only from the outside world, but also from the ghosts that still inhabit my soul. I promise to build with you a future where love is always stronger than fear." When the priest declared them husband and wife, the chapel bells, silent for 3 years, began to ring again, their bronze singing a song of hope that spread across the cornfields like divine blessing. Tomás, promoted to general administrator of the hacienda, organized a party that lasted until dawn. Mariachis came from Guadalajara especially for the occasion, and their voices mixed with the aroma of mole poblano and tamales prepared by the village women. But the true miracle happened when Rosa Maria and Raphael, now husband and wife, walked together to the garden where that first wild poinsettia flower she had mentioned months before still grew. "She's still here," Raphael whispered, delicately touching the red petals. "Some things survive winter," Rosa Maria replied, "to bloom even more beautiful in spring." That night, while the full moon bathed the restored hacienda with its silver light, they realized they had found something rare and precious. Not just love, but redemption. 8 months later, June 1879, Hacienda El Encanto had recovered its lost glory, like a flower blooming after a long drought. The gardens exploded in vibrant colors. Roses from Castile brought directly from Spain, mixed with native Mexican flowers, creating a perfumed carpet that extended as far as the eye could see. Rosa Maria, now Doña Rosa Maria Valdemar de la Cruz, walked through the mansion's corridors with the sure step of one who had finally found her place in the world. Her belly, rounded with the promise of new life, was gently caressed by the morning breeze that entered through the open windows. Raphael emerged from the office, the same where they had discovered the truth months before, but now transformed into a center of prosperous activity. Papers scattered over the desk were no longer conspiracy documents, but sales contracts, harvest records, and plans to expand the school they had built for the peons' children. "Mi querida esposa," he murmured, offering her a poinsettia flower he had personally picked in the garden. "The first harvest in 3 years will be the largest in the hacienda's history." From the patio came the sounds of celebration. Peons and their families gathered to celebrate the end of planting season. Joyful voices mixed with the sound of guitars and the aroma of barbacoa slowly roasting in clay ovens. Tomás approached with a broad smile stamped on his bronzed face. "Don Rafael, the lands produce like in your father's time. Buyers from Puebla are already sending messengers to negotiate next season's corn." The Mendoza family had moved to a distant village after the scandal of trying to sell their eldest daughter to pay for the youngest's dowry. Carmen finally married, but without the brilliance she had dreamed of. Her husband proved to be a common man who demanded she work in the family store instead of being adored like a princess. Don Aurelio remained in the capital's prison, where he would spend at least 10 years paying for his crimes. His accomplices had been banished from the region, and the usurped lands were returned to their rightful owners. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in golden and rosy tones, Raphael and Rosa Maria climbed to the mansion's highest tower, the place from where one could see the entire extension of their recovered lands. "Do you remember what you said on that first night of storm?" Raphael asked, enveloping his wife in a protective embrace. "Que Dios no abandona a sus hijos?" she replied, smiling as she felt the baby move in her womb. "Yes, and how right you were." He kissed her forehead with infinite tenderness. "He sent us to each other when we most needed hope." Below, the party continued. Paper lanterns lit up like earthly stars, and the sound of music floated through the warm night like an ancestral blessing. Rosa Maria and Raphael remained embraced in the tower, observing their restored world, not just the lands and buildings, but the people, the dreams, the hope. They had learned that true monsters don't always roar in the darkness. Sometimes they wear false smiles and speak of love while plotting destruction. But they had also discovered that true love, the kind that grows silently like a wildflower among stones, can transform even the greatest tragedies into foundations for lasting happiness. Ya no eran prisioneros del pasado, sino arquitectos de un futuro dorado como el maíz de sus tierras.